Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about a little bit of a transfer portal update, gave you guys an idea of where everything sits, had a couple of big time running backs come off the board, so definitely check that out if you haven't already. But let's get to a Good Vibes Monday and let's talk about some of the best draft stories. I think the draft is awesome for a million different reasons, and I think a lot of people like to focus on the athletes and focus on the on-field consequences of what happens in that weekend, but the off-field consequences are even more impactful. And there's so many great stories that came out of this weekend. Obviously, I could spend an entire hour on all the stories that came out, but won't have time to do that today. But definitely some guys that I want to highlight that overcame injuries, that overcame some family issues, that overcame just being very low on the depth chart and having to battle and having to get through some stuff that would have been really tough for a lot of us to get through. So I wanted to highlight some of the kids, and let's start with Michael Penix Jr., someone that definitely made some headlines on Thursday, so a little bit of a head scratcher pick from the Falcons there, and people have definitely been kind of going after it a little bit, and I understand definitely a pick that will get scrutinized a lot over the next little bit, but I don't want it to overshadow what this kid has kind of overcome to get to the point where he was picked number 8 overall. I mean, the kid had 2 torn ACLs, missed multiple years of football while at Indiana, transferred over to Washington, and just did not look back. Had a remarkable 2 years, a national championship appearance, was a Heisman finalist, did just about everything you could have asked him to do, and got himself into an 8th overall pick. I mean, it's just remarkable after being, pretty much an afterthought in college football, burst onto the scene in that year in Indiana, but then had some really, really tough luck. And the ability to battle back, the ability to find a new place to play, and not only, be able to play, be able to get on the field, but thrive the way that he did was just a remarkable thing to watch. And although that pick is a little bit head scratching to a lot of people, and definitely to myself as well, to be totally honest with you, I think it's just remarkable what this kid has overcome, and it shows you why the Falcons fell in love with this kid so much, because you know that every time this kid steps on the football field, he doesn't take a second for granted, because he knows how quickly it can all be taken away from you and how quickly you're sitting on the sideline and wishing you were out there. So he's someone that I totally understand how the Falcons fell in love with him. I think he is someone that a lot of those fans will fall in love with, despite some of the aggressive things you might see coming out of Atlanta Falcons fans' Twitters and mouths right now. But this is a kid that has overcome so much to get to where he is, and just felt like he definitely deserved some of that respect and definitely deserved to be highlighted this way, because man, I can't imagine, tearing both your ACLs, having to battle back the way he did, and doing it, and not only doing it, to get back on the field, but become the 8th overall pick in the draft is something special for sure. Adisa Isaac is another guy that overcame an injury. He had to sit out the 2021 year with a torn Achilles, came back, made a huge impact, and is now a Baltimore Raven. Definitely a guy that I'm very excited to see at the next level. I think someone that, because of that injury, had a little bit left on the table in his college career, but definitely will be have the ability to reach his highest heights in Baltimore. So very excited for him. I think he's someone that I'm very much rooting for, just because I love his play style and love the way that he approaches the game. And then finally, a very interesting story around an injury that a lot of us remember: Zach Zinter going down with a fractured fibula and tibia, in the Ohio State game. It turns out they drafted Michael Hall Jr., who was involved in that. He kind of got thrown into Zach Zinter's leg and caused that injury. And Zach Zinter has obviously said there is no hard feelings. Michael Hall Jr., football is a dangerous game, and sometimes there are accidents that happen. So obviously a very unfortunate accident, but those two guys now that probably hated each other not too long ago, being Ohio State and Michigan guys, now get to compete against each other in practice and wear the same jersey and go to battle with each other. So two guys that were connected in not the greatest way in the world before, are now connected in definitely a better way than they were before. But then we've broken down, guys that have overcome injuries. Cooper DeJean is another guy that definitely deserves to be highlighted here, but there are other guys that have overcome other hurdles that, injuries are incredibly tough to overcome, but there are some guys that overcome much more to get to where they are today, and I think the biggest example is probably Jonathan Brooks, someone that has done an incredible job during his time at Texas, has overcome a lot not only on the field but off the field. He lost his father early in his life and has a tattoo that commemorates him on his forearm. So if you see him score, tap his forearm and point to the sky. He'll do that every time he scores, and you will know the meaning now. It's definitely a very cool story. They had a picture of him at the draft party, so he could be a part of the fun and definitely share that moment. You could see how much it meant to him and his family. So just a remarkable story of a kid that overcome something that a lot of us can't even imagine, right? So really huge props to him becoming the player that he is and becoming the guy that he is. And the Panthers definitely got a fantastic player in person in Jonathan Brooks. But some other guys that have overcome some things that have a little bit more to do with football rather than, what Jonathan Brooks went through. We had Cody Schrader, who was a great story this past year with Missouri, had found his way from Truman College, a very small school, to be a walk-on at Missouri, and is now a draft pick. So just a remarkable story, a guy that absolutely worked his butt off and deserves all the love in the world for that. Another guy that absolutely worked his butt off is Christian Jones, the tackle out of Texas. The dude literally didn't play tackle football until junior year. He was a soccer player that did not even think about playing football, then played it in his junior year of high school, and 6 years later, he is a draft pick. He is in the NFL and has done remarkable work to become the player he is, because when Steve Sarkisian came in, there was a lot of people that were very nervous about this kid starting. And then by the end of his time, he was as dominant of an offensive tackle as there was in the entire Big 12, and got drafted and has done just remarkable things to improve his game. So huge props to him. Very excited to see him at the next level. Another Texas guy that has gone through a lot, kind of through the Texas turmoil, if you will, is Jordan Whittington. Someone that came in during Tom Herman's time, towards the end of Tom Herman's time, where they didn't have any running backs on the roster. Him and Roschon Johnson kind of took over some of the burden there, and then he was able to move back to wide receiver, became the absolute heartbeat of this team. And that was one of the reasons that Les Snead, the Rams GM, said that they picked him, was because every time that they talked to someone around Texas, they said, this kid is going to do everything that you want him to do in the exact right way. He is going to lift up your teammates, not only be a good guy on the field for you, but be a fantastic guy in the locker room. And he's overcome so much within that program, where it's been a crazy couple of years while he's been there. But being able to come out the other side and be a draft pick and live out that dream is just remarkable. So wanted to give him some props, and then some other really interesting moments, particularly from the Colts draft, that I want to break down real quick. One was from Chris Ballard, the GM, addressing kind of the negative rumors around Adonai Mitchell that possibly made him fall as far as they did in the draft. Honestly, ridiculous rumors. I'm not going to put any more out there because I've seen nothing to make me believe that they are true. But at the end of the day, I think the way that Chris Ballard handled it was exactly how I would want it to be handled if I was Adonai Mitchell. Now, I won't repeat what he said because I'd like to keep hosting the show, but at the end of the day, it's something that you don't see very often. You see a lot of these guys, talk very carefully and not say anything too aggressive, and Chris Ballard threw all that out the window and was definitely very intense. And I think it's something that kind of has to happen. You see all these different stories throughout the upcoming to the draft, and you see some stories where you're like, that's a little bit weird. I don't know. I haven't heard anything about him, and now all this stuff starts to come out. A lot of it's not true. And the Adonai Mitchell stuff particularly was very weird, and I don't know. It didn't sit right with me, and it definitely didn't sit right with Chris Ballard. So love to see someone, go out there that aggressively for one of their guys, and I'm sure Adonai Mitchell and his family really appreciated that as well, and he's ready to go play for that guy, that's for sure. But then another moment from the Colts draft that I thought was very funny and gives you an idea of what the NFL draft is like for these kids. When they called their 7th-round draft pick, Jonah Lualu from Utah, a very talented edge rusher that I think honestly was an absolute steal in the 7th round for them. But when he called them, he genuinely thought they were prank calling him. He genuinely thought he had to ask the question to Chris Ballard. He wanted to make sure that he was actually getting the call that he had waited so long for. I mean, it gives you an idea of how long these guys have to wait, how long it feels that they have to wait throughout that last day. And getting that call must be very, very special. But waiting that long definitely makes you think twice when you actually get that call. So, tons of stuff to break down from this NFL draft. I mean, I only scratched the surface with some of the stories that can be unpacked here. I mean, we had Junior Colson getting drafted by his head coach from college, and Jim Harbaugh going over to the Chargers to join him. Tons of really cool stuff. We had the funny video that Drake May's brothers gave to him that was just incredible in every sense of the word. Absolutely loved that. I think there were just a remarkable amount of moments that you can break down from pretty much every NFL draft for quite some time now that are just make you feel good and make this moment that means so much to the kids and the families. It gives you an idea of just how much it is and just how much they've overcome to get to that point now. I could unpack number of kids that have overcome injuries, whether it's really tough ones or just minor ones that you have to keep working through. Guys that worked from walk-ons to an NFL draft pick, guys that have bounced around and finally found where they thrived and found their way into the draft. There are so many different stories that I could break down, but didn't quite have the time for that today. But we'll definitely continue to unpack these stories as they continue to pop up. But a huge shout out to all the guys that got drafted, a huge shout out to their family and friends. I mean, just a huge weekend for all of them, and it never gets old seeing those guys get that call and seeing them be celebrated that way. So a huge prop to them. Love this that weekend, and definitely had some good vibes coming out of that weekend watching all those guys get that call. But that'll do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Tommy Brzee. As always, your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference for us. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all of the social pages for all of the content and updates that we do. We have tons of people covering every sport you could possibly want, so we will definitely break down everything you could possibly need. Come on over to GSMC and we absolutely have you covered. But thank you once again for listening, and I will see you guys tomorrow.